holidays nale adu namma GT Holidays da, South India's #1 travel brand.
Join the team. Which values you and your thoughts? Hiring now.
ஒரு மேடை 2 விருதுகள். கலாட்டாவின் நக்ஷத்ரா மற்றும் வண்டர் உமன் அவார்ட்ஸ் வர நவம்பர் 30 நேரு உள்விளையாட்டு அரங்கில் மிக பிரம்மாண்டமாக நடக்க இருக்கு. இந்த நிகழ்ச்சியை நீங்களும் நேரில் கண்டு ரசிக்கணுமா? இப்போவே டிஸ்கிரிப்ஷனில் இருக்க லிங்கை கிளிக் பண்ணுங்க, உங்களோட ஃப்ரீ டிக்கெட்ஸை புக் பண்ணுங்க. அல்லது www.galatta.com என்ற வெப்சைட்டில் கிளிக் பண்ணி உங்களோட ஃப்ரீ டிக்கெட்ஸை இப்போவே பெற்றுக்கொள்ளலாம்.
I'm Rakesh Khanna. I'm a co-founder of Blaft Publications. And so I'm also the author of this book, Ghosts, Monsters, and Demons of India, which is an encyclopedia of folkloric monsters and fiends from all over the country. I'm here with Milind Rau. I thought I'd start out by asking Milind about how he got into horror. He was telling me earlier about some of the movies that he grew up with.
Before I start, I just wanted to say that I wanted to give a big disclaimer, that horror, I'm here as a horror lover, as a horror fan. More than I'm not a horror expert here, because I think everybody has their take on horror, and everybody has movies that, in horror that they would say, scared them more, or were, was part of their nostalgia of horror or whatever it is when they were growing up, So there's no real expert on that, but I'm here more of as a horror fan than anything else. And how I got into horror was just that. It's curiosity. When you're kind of young, and I was, going to the video libraries. That time it was all VHS. And we used to kind of, they had these flip books with those posters of the, what movies they had in their collection and all of that. And so I used to flip through these flip books of movies, and some of the most eye-catching, posters would be horror movies, So it would just stand out. And I'll be like, I have to see this now. I can't let go. I can't not see this movie. So films like, The Howling and Wishmaster and all of that, just 80s B movies, horror, just amazing fun stuff. And some more films like, Gremlins and Fright Night, which they keep remaking, and they made the newer version with Colin Farrell and all of that. So, and Evil Dead, of course. It's a classic. I've seen it in the theater as well. And for some strange reason, there was also a time when we used to really be able to watch all of these B movies, horror movies, in theaters. Like it used to play, like in mainstream theaters here in Chennai. So I've gone and watched Peter Jackson, the guy who made Lord of the Rings. He started his career with this complete B horror movie, which is full of gore, and it's a horror comedy. It's called Brain Dead. And I remember seeing it in Shanti Theatres, there on Mount Road, and me and my friends, and we just saw this poster of this amazingly kind of fun film that we immediately had to go and watch, and then Evil Dead was also part of that whole experience of watching it in the theater and all of that.
I was also shocked when I first moved to Chennai, meeting people in my engineering college. Everyone had seen all 5 Evil Dead movies. It was, I didn't expect it. Those movies would be what came from Hollywood and really made some of the biggest impression here.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And Dawn of the Dead was the next one.
And Dawn of the Dead, of course. It's just set the path for all of the zombie movies that you see today. Dawn of the Dead, George A. Romero was the creator of the genre itself as such, And there's some very interesting collaborations on this. That Dario Argento's done the music for Dawn of the Dead and all of that. And so Dario Argento happens to be another very famous Italian giallo horror filmmaker who's made Suspiria and Tenebra and all of that, When you start exploring, and then what happened was that the internet happened. So then you start researching more, because the video libraries, you only can see what they have, right? And then, so that leads you to some, so if you can say that my horror film experience has only been what I could get my hands on till a point of time. And then once the whole internet came, and then you could start searching for movies and all that, it really opened up and, widened my horizon even more. And I started watching more international, horror movies. Like I said, Italian, Japanese horror films, the original Ringu and Ju-on, which is actually made in Hollywood as The Grudge and all that. And Korean films like Tale of Two Sisters and all of those things. All great, great horror films that I just kept looking up and watching once the whole internet opened up, and you could see movies from all over the world. So it was just some of the stuff that I grew up that was influencing me more and more to kind of make horror films, as a filmmaker and all of that. And of course, there's a lot of stuff that we read as well, right?
Right. Yeah. So I also wanted to ask, just this is all Hollywood influence. How much did like Indian stories, whether it's Indian movies or Indian fiction or Indian folklore, how much does that influence your
That influenced me a
storytelling?
lot, especially Tamil. I've seen Padimuna Number Veedu, I've seen Yar, I've seen My Dear Lisa, which was actually a remake of a Malayalam film called Lisa, and then there was a sequel to that film, which was a big commercial success. And My Dear Lisa was the Tamil dubbing of that film. So My Dear Lisa was a very, very popular. These are all big hit, and they were like full-on B movies. And then there was also Nalaya Manidan, which is just like Reanimator. Basically he kind of experiments. There's this mad scientist who experiments with a drug and pumps someone who can bring the dead to life, and that guy goes crazy and starts killing people. So that kind of was the whole basically story of that Nalaya Manidan and all of that. So I was watching a lot of stuff, and these were all films that were successful, in the box office, and films that that really I kind of was watching when I was watching all these other films as well. And of course, there was Indra Soundarajan, writers like Rajesh Kumar. But I've not read too much of the literature, but I've seen Vidada Karuppu, I've seen Marmadesam, serials they've made, on TV, which the series, what we call, long form series now, they were making already back then, and very, very successfully. And so a lot of Tamil folklore, a lot of Tamil horror and all of that has come on TV through their writing. I haven't read much of their writing, but I've seen this.
Indra Soundarajan especially, I think, was all
Indra
over the
Soundarajan,
small screen for a really, really long time. Yeah, and I think in English we have these very separate genres of like horror and crime, and in Tamil those tend to be mixed up a little more, right?
Correct,
Like
yeah.
Indra Soundarajan is a crime and a horror writer. Like
Yeah.
both of them will come. There will be ghosts, and there will be police, and there will be criminals, and there will be buried treasure, and all of that stuff will come in those stories. I also really like, so we've translated and published a few of his stories.
Yeah, which
Nirmal
I've read.
Rajagopalan is here. He's the translator of the Ayakudi Murders, which is a
Oh, nice.
Indra Soundarajan novel, which has
Good to meet you.
Katha Karuppu and
I read the first edition of the whole Blaft,
Tamil Pulp Fiction
Tamil
anthology.
Pulp
So
Fiction,
that
yeah.
also
I've
has.
not yet read the second edition yet, but it was very interesting. I had a ball reading that.
Yeah, so we have two anthologies. The second one has more horror stories.
Okay. Then I should get my hands on that first.
Yeah. So I got interested in, we did translations of pulp novels, and then with Preetham Chakravarti, we also did a translation of this K. Rajnarayanan folklore. So he has a book called Natapura Kadai Kalanjam, which has a big chapter of Pays and Pisases. There's so many different kinds of demons and ghosts in that folklore, which I had never heard of before, and which do come in some Tamil movies. But I think also, we were talking earlier, I think, about how Indian movies maybe don't draw as much as they could from the number of different like folkloric demons that we have here. And I think you did interesting things in Aval. There's a lot going on there. There's Indian and Western and Chinese mythology all kind of mixed up in it.
No, but I kind of have seen so much more after that, like looking into the folklore that we have, that I really want to kind of explore that. And as you said, my next couple of projects are all based, the horror elements in them are all based in folklore from Indian ghosts and monsters and all of that. So I think
You were talking about something with the Yatudanas. Is that-
yeah. That's top secret right now.
Oh,
but,
sorry.
but since you let the cat a little bit out of the bag, Yatudana is one of the monsters which is part of the lore, which is basically kind of a blood-sucking demon and all of that. What we call kateris, ratta kateri in our terminology and all of that, they call vampires. And there's just such a huge vampire lore out there in Western, fiction and all of that. And but we do have a lot of stories about ratta kateris and yakshis and all of that, which is the exact same equivalent here. So and there's very, very interesting mythologies of how each of those demons were and what their roots are and how they were formed and everything. So there's just a treasure trove of stories in our own mythology with ghosts and demons and monsters that I think any filmmaker who loves the genre can really create a new world with just these stories. I'm saying that we already have in our history, in our mythology.
Yatudanas were really interesting to me because they're so old. Like the first mentions of those are in like the Rig Veda, which is already like 1000 BC or something, and then they come along with one other demon called the Kimidin.
Okay.
And Kimidin, like they think that that name is maybe from this Mesopotamian demon, Ekimidime. So it's like, that's from 4000 BC. So like already in the Rig Veda is 3000 years ago. This is referencing a demon from 3000 years further back than that. So those guys come along with the Yatudanas. It's really, really old, scary stuff. Like, it's kind of amazing to me that we know the names of these demons, which were part of the folklore 6,000 years ago, and they've still come in. But yeah, so the Yatudanas are supposed to be necromancers. Yeah, they sort of raise the dead and do horrible rituals and fly around and are naked most of the time.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I read from your book. I was just reading up on a little bit through the, the encyclopedia of the ghosts and demons and all of that. So, but I have other, things that I've been researching, and it does have a more interesting background, which I'll share when we watch the film.
All right.
So, but having said that, there is so much that we can say, so many stories, and each of them has like a proper origin and everything, and powers and weaknesses and everything. So I'm saying just the imagery of just the way they're described can actually be quite unique to something that nobody's ever seen before. And I think so it should be something we should explore, and when we have that history with us of stories. And that's, I think, the past. And I think more of the literature we were talking about of that's some of the Tamil literature which I've read about horror, like Indra Sandarajan, Rajesh Kumar, and like you said, crime and pulp fiction and all of that. But a lot of, again, for me, because I was growing up, I was a voracious reader, but I was mainly reading in English.
Yeah.
So I was reading a lot of Stephen King, Dean Koontz, and these authors were like, I mean, unbelievably good with their horror and the kind of books they wrote. And Anne Rice, a lot of the vampire books that she's written and all of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I prefer the Stephen King kind of horror and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, he's so massively influential on all cinema
Yeah.
and horror literature now. Even I think when Stranger Things came out, I went back and read Firestarter.
Ah, okay.
It's actually, I mean, Stranger Things is another version of Firestarter, really. So much of that show comes from that book. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of Hollywood horror is still running on Stephen King plots.
Exactly, yeah. From Pet Sematary to, the original Shining, the book and all of that.
Yeah.
I've read that, and I've read Salem's Lot, and, you've read, he's just got such a wide range. Christine, which is a car that goes crazy, a spirit that's in a car. And then there's Cujo, which is the scariest thing that you can imagine, if your dog goes crazy and, attacks you, and luckily they didn't say it was an evil dog, it was just a rabid dog in the film, but it was...
I think I have the Cujo poster on there.
Oh, you do? That's just one of the most amazing, and again, this was when I was growing up, and I love dogs, and to see a dog turn on you that way, it just is, that's what, See, that's the thing with horror, it appeals to your, like deepest fear, right? And then we tend to, as horror filmmakers, we tend to go there and push that, that nerve, which will, so it's basically kind of like, why do people go on roller coasters? Why do people go on, skydiving? Why do people do all of these things? Because, and I think that's the experience that horror takes you through. It's just a visceral experience. And so that's why I'm saying that they just take your deepest fears and we try to put it on film. And so.
You've talked a little bit about how you feel in India, horror is not taken seriously as a genre. Like people don't give the respect to a horror film as would happen in Hollywood.
I strongly believe that, so because I think that you see most of the great filmmakers, like a lot of them, like you take Francis Ford Coppola, he's made a Dracula. Take Martin Scorsese, he's made, he's made Shutter Island and he's made Cape Fear. Okay, they're not exactly 100% horror, but they're on the edge.
Scary.
Yeah, they're very scary. And you take David Fincher, he's made Aliens 3. You take James Cameron, he's made an Alien, the second Aliens as well. So I'm saying that Stanley Kubrick, of course, has made The Shining. And then the people who do make horror like as their body of work, like John Carpenter and all that, they're called masters of horror in the West. And there is a certain level of skill, craft, and everything that people do recognize that horror involves. because it can get very cheesy if you cross the, like Peter Jackson, like I said, the Lord of the Rings director has started with Brain Dead, you know, which is one of the goriest, campiest, cheesiest B horror movies you can see. But I think Sam Raimi,
It's
Sam
so
Raimi
over
has
the
been
top
yeah,
with the
yeah.
gore that
and
it's
Sam Raimi, who's
kind
made
of
the Spider-Man
unbelievable.
movies, he started with the Evil Dead, you know, and he still goes back to his horror roots and makes that Drag Me to Hell, you know, which is just amazing. And so I'm saying that, but here, you know, if you say that you like to make horror films, oh, he just makes horror films, you know, it's like, it's not something that's I think given its due here, you're not considered as like a, but it's actually involves a convincing horror film involves so much of technique, so much of craft, so much of work on sound, so much of work, and the performance is flat, you'll just laugh out loud. So there is a level of performance from the actors that you need to make it convincing and all of that. So there is a lot of craft in the genre as well. But I feel that it's not been given its due here, you know. I think one film at a time, maybe we should try changing that.
I think there's just such a long tradition of these Hindi films that are kind of just built around the jump scare.
Yeah.
People
No, I
have
think
seen
it's
too
also-
many of those.
Yeah, I think we also have made too many of those which take the easy way out, you know, to actually have characters, a story arc, characters that you care about, and a story arc that is convincing, and something that, a lore that you haven't seen before, done in the right way, you know, with the correct amount of seriousness. And I think the audiences are there because they are not saying they don't want to see it, because they are watching all of the other horror that's being, you know, like Stranger Things has done very well in India. And a lot of the, like Conjuring, when it came out, was a big blockbuster, and when it was dubbed in all the other languages, I mean regional languages and all of that. So I really believe that they want it, they are ready for it. It's just that I think we have to start taking it more seriously as filmmakers and giving them that, you know, what they want basically. So
I do think that like regional language television and Hindi television tends to draw on Hindi folklore for their horror plots a lot more than the films do. Like I've seen a lot of stuff on the small screen that has like, you know, Karna Pisasanis, or like, you know, these sort of demons that you might not have seen from the screen. Somehow on the big screen, we often get into Western tropes. And I mean, it was interesting, I thought, in Aval, because you kind of had a Western exorcism going on. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that. Like, you know, the exorcism scene in his movie is incredible, if you haven't seen it.
yeah, no, see, if you see, I have a lot of influence. I mean, it had a Chinese ghost, it has a Western exorcism, because the character is played by a family that are
Christian
Pentecostal
family, yeah,
Christians
right.
and all that, you know. And it's a mock exorcism that happens. So it's not really an exorcism. So in that story world that we were making, it made sense to have a scene of exorcism and all of that, you know. And we were saying the film was set in, you know, Manali and all of those things. So that whole Chinese connect, and that the social evil that we are talking about, which is at the root of the film, was something that exists in the Chinese culture and our culture as well. That you know, that sacrificing a male child, I mean, a female child to have a male child. You know, so that's what. Those are all elements that kind of led to choosing the tropes that were needed for the film. The family, they were a Christian family. This was set in a place where it was close to the, you know, Chinese border, and all of those things that led us to choose these tropes that we did finally end up using in the film. So yeah, it just was extremely difficult to shoot that scene because of all the elements that were there in terms of had to come together with the prosthetics and the VFX and the stunt.
People hanging upside
Yeah,
down.
people
in the
hanging
air
upside down with wires.
rotating crosses.
Yeah, and glass shattering, and you know, screams and everything. You know, body twisting. All of that was a combination of like all the departments in filmmaking, like from visual effects to prosthetics to, like I said, sound design to stunt and all of that. All of them were involved in that scene. And that's how we were able to crack that exorcism scene.
In a future movie, might we see a different exorcism scene with the
Definitely. Definitely. Why not? Because no, I'm just like, you know, that one of my favorite films, I mean, it might be the most mainstream today, but not when it came out, was The Exorcist. There's no doubt about it, you know, like, you know, the makeup artist on that, Dick Smith, went on to win the Oscar for the best makeup and all of that, you know. So it's something that people had never seen before. And so it's something so influential that it's something that's left so much of an impact.
I don't
My
know if
wife
it's an-
refuses to see that film even today again.
I don't know if it's an
She
urban
saw it by
legend.
mistake once and she's never seen it ever again because it still scares her, kind of thing. So I'm saying a lot of people say that about The Exorcist. I'm saying, so when there's something that's so strongly on your mind when you're on a film, that, and you want to take a crack at it, so why not, why not do something that is an homage, okay? There's a term here. Quentin Tarantino does that, it's an homage and it's understood. But here, if you do it, it's like we're stealing,
copying, yeah.
But that's not the whole intention. It's
Right.
purely coming from a place of you've seen that and you want to give it a shot and you want to really, really try to do something different with it,
Yeah.
and see if you can do something that can come close to something that they've achieved, and that too, the way they've achieved it in 1979 with practical effects and all that is just unbelievable. Till today, I'm saying that it's very convincing
Yeah.
and very, very looks so real and all of that.
I don't know if it's an urban legend. I've heard that there was a thing in Chennai that if you could go and watch The Exorcist alone in the theater, that you would win some money or something like that. People have always told me that it's happened in Chennai. I don't know if it's true.
I think every city has that story.
Okay, maybe.
About definitely about Exorcist and some other film that they would have that. But that's the fun of horror, right? Like these kind of urban legends that keep circling around, and then there are stories like somebody watched The Exorcist and died.
Yeah.
Somebody watched The Exorcist and threw up like uncontrollably, and then somebody fainted and they had to be taken out of the theater. I've heard all of these stories. Right. So that's the fun of it, right? Like I said, it's a roller coaster. It's just end of the day, that's what you're going in for, and that's what it gives you if it's done right.
You want to go through some more of these? Let's see what else put in this list.
Of course, Nightmare on Elm Street is
I'm not familiar with this one. You said
Maniac Cop is one of the precursors to the slasher genre. Friday the 13th, Maniac Cop, and all of these films, like these are all like proper, B movies.
This is 80s, yeah? This is
80s,
proper
80s horror, Hollywood horror. Reanimator is actually, but in retrospect, when you look at it, it's actually based on a story by H.P. Lovecraft.
yeah.
I didn't know that. I just found it fascinating, and as I said, it was the same kind of film was done in Tamil also as Nalaya Manidan, which is about reanimating someone from the dead with a drug, and then they go crazy and all of that.
it's kind of an atypical H.P. Lovecraft story, I think. I mean, most of his stuff is this kind of
yeah.
cosmic horror about
Correct, yeah.
extra-dimensional demons from millions of years ago.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, he was such a weirdo.
Yeah, but amazingly.
Yeah, amazing imagination, horribly racist person, but yeah, he came up with
he
came up with some really amazing stories.
Amazing stories in that sense, yeah. And Warlock is again, you haven't seen
I haven't seen this one.
You should watch it. This is like Wishmaster, Warlock, all of this was a genre of films that was very interesting. This guy comes back from the past to the present, and he's this warlock, and so he has this evil magic that he uses, and he's after someone here, and then so he goes crazy, and they try to stop this evil wizard who kills people in horrible ways with his magic and all of that. So that's just the one-line gist of it.
I was into the music that went along with all these films, like the whole
Wishmaster is a very twisted film
Bauhaus
where
and
they
Sisters
take the
of Mercy
typical
songs.
genie element of 3 wishes
Okay.
and they twist it into a dark thing, where they say that guy is so twisted that if you wish for something, he'll make you like really experience that in the most horrible way. He'll twist it around, and then after the 3rd wish, he'll kill you. And so how do you get away from this genie and all of that? Is that basically the Wishmaster, and it's really fun because the way the guy performs it, and it's like this very, very fun watch that you can enjoy. And The Fly, David Cronenberg.
That's Cronenberg's, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
David
Jeff
Cronenberg
Goldblum,
is an amazing director, and
yeah.
The Fly is one of the best, and it's it's body horror. It's kind of so creepy and so unique. It's science fiction, horror, and what's your take on it?
Yeah, you have to watch both. You have to watch the 1950s one with Vincent Price, and then this one. It's like the contrast is amazing.
I haven't watched the
It's
original
like
one.
very cheesy and simple. And then you watch this one, and it's like
Yeah.
what he did with that movie is crazy.
And of course, there was the series of the werewolf movies. That was this one, American Werewolf in London, which is John Landis, the guy who made for everybody to know, the one who made the Thriller video, Michael Jackson's Thriller, and it was done by John Landis, who's made this American Werewolf in London, and he's the guy, the same guy who got Rick Baker, the makeup artist, to do the whole werewolf makeup and all that. And so it was a genre that was very popular in the 80s, the werewolf, genre, which I've seen, like the Silver Bullet. I've seen that. I've seen.
It's kind of fallen out, right?
It's fallen out.
There hasn't been a werewolf movie in a while.
We've done one recently.
Twilight, thank you. Yeah.
Which one? I'm sorry.
Twilight. Yeah.
Twilight,
good
of course.
point.
Yeah. Twilight is there, but I don't even think we can. I don't know. I mean, that is definitely a werewolf and vampire film, but.
India's like more on the were-tiger trip in its folklore.
Yeah.
There's not so many werewolves in Indian folklore, but lots of were-tigers and were-leopards.
Yeah.
I can't think of a good were-tiger movie.
There was one now which came.
Tiger? Hindi movie called Tiger.
Yeah, not Tiger, Junoon, that was. Junoon. Rahul Roy and all that. And but again, that's going into that slightly cheesy zone, which was how those stories were being made at that point of time,
Maybe you should do a lycanthrope movie.
Yeah.
Lycanthrope is the general word, therianthrope.
Well, I haven't, I have been doing my research on it.
Yeah.
And there's not much lycanthrope kind of werewolf mythology in Indian folklore.
It's not so much wolves, it's leopards and tigers.
Yeah.
And there's a distinction actually. There's the were-tigers and the were-tiger men. There's this Naga writer, Eastern Kire, who talks about how in Naga lore, and this is also there in like Gond mythology, where it's not that the person actually changes into a tiger, but they like kind of sleep and astrally project a tiger. So their body will be there in human form, but their spirit will go out and become a tiger. Oh. And that tiger will have 5 claws. So like this is there like in the Northeast and in Central India both. And in Kasi, I think, I forget what the Kasi words are, but there's the 4-claw tiger and the 5-claw tiger. 4-claw tiger is the real tiger, and the 5-claw is this is actually a person's spirit that they've sent out.
I think we need to have a long chat about this.
Yeah.
So I can pick your brain for some ideas. But see, that's what I'm saying. It's so fascinating that we have all of this, and it's all there in your book, right? That
whatever I could find. I'm still finding more after I wrote the book.
Yeah. That's the amazing part.
Yeah.
You try to
really
make
deep.
an encyclopedia of demons and ghosts and monsters of Indian folklore, and you've made such a comprehensive book, and you're still saying you're finding things too.
I mean, there's hundreds of
That's
languages,
amazing.
right? And every language in this country has its own pantheon. I mean,
Yeah.
especially when you like the Northeast is like the most crazy because you'll go. I mean, like Mizoram is like a million people, but they have their own pantheon of. I mean, it's this incredible pantheon of ghosts and shapeshifters and little dwarf things that hop on one leg, and if you catch them, they'll grant wishes, and fungs and fungpuinus. And so we've done this book called Mizo Myths with Sherry Sangte, and they're really into supernatural love stories, like Twilight again, except there's all these different like Mizo supernatural beings that fall in love with humans and sometimes have kids. It gets complicated.
And of course, if you take literature from the present, I mean, there's a lot of graphic novels that are also very influential in terms of, if you're talking about horror literature, that's very evocative as well, which, like I've read the whole 30 Days of Night graphic novel, which is an amazing concept, like a vampire story set in somewhere in the North Pole or something where there's 30 days of night.
Okay.
So imagine what
Overnight,
a vampire that survives only in the night can do when there's 30 days of night, and it's when all hell breaks loose. So it's an amazing graphic
Do you
novel.
know who that's
out there.
by? I haven't heard of that.
I don't remember the name of the writer, but it's pretty famous, and just have to look up 30 Days of Night. It's called 30 Days of Night. And that is something. And then there's the Japanese manga horror, which is Junji Ito.
Junji Ito.
Which is like...
I came very late to Junji Ito, but
Yeah.
the last couple of years we have a bunch of
It is
Uzumaki.
Uzumaki is spirals.
Uzumaki is terrifying. It has this town
Terrifying.
which is beset by spirals. It's like
Yeah.
these spirals
So
taking over everyone's
everywhere you
mind.
see, it's a very abstract concept that they have made into a horror film. It's called spirals. So the pattern spirals is taking over basically a town, and it slowly you start seeing spirals everywhere, you know, in your skin and in everything, and then it starts taking over the town and all of that. It's very surreal, it's very crazy, and it's wonderfully illustrated, and it's, you should read that Japanese. There is the English translation of that.
Did they make a movie? Did you said a movie?
I don't think they've made a movie of that, but
would be hard.
It's you should see all of Junji Ito's works, his manga, horror manga. He does horror manga, and that's amazing.
There is a Netflix series now also, no? A Junji Ito Netflix.
There is one, but not this, not Spirals.
Not
though.
Uzumaki.
So that is something, and then there's other graphic novels also,
Charles
like
Burns.
Then there's The Strain, which is by Guillermo del Toro. He's co-written that graphic novel.
Oh, I didn't see
which they made into a series. Okay. It is about when vampires take over New York. You know, and that's just so they go into the underground tunnels and sewers, and they kind of nest there. And when basically Dracula comes to, you know, and there's a backstory of how, you know, he was formed in World War II and all of that, and it's amazing. It's just like that series of graphic novels. It's called The Strain by Guillermo del Toro. You should read that, and it's wonderfully illustrated. Again, brought to life as a series and all of that. First few seasons very successful, and all of these things. So some of those in the present, I'm saying, these kind of things have been very influential for me, because the kind of imagery, they just keep taking the genre forward, and how much they can push the boundaries and all of that is something that is really good to see from all of this stuff. So
that's the present. That's
the present.
So what's the future of Tamil horror movies or Indian horror movies?
No, I think there's actually a lot of good stuff that's coming out, and you know, there are filmmakers who are doing a lot of good horror now in Tamil, in Hindi, and in Malayalam. And you know, there's some very good filmmakers that are really focusing on the genre and doing, you know, things. So I think it's in a very good space to be in, and I think I just think that if we take the genre more seriously, we'll start getting better stuff that you know, out there, and hopefully all of this stuff that I grew up with and which has left a permanent scar in my psyche will pay off in some kind of way when we, you know, go to make those films that we want to do. So, but I think it's a good space that we're in, and because of what's happening is that the OTT space is also like I'm doing The Village, right, and that's a very interesting space that has not been done before in India at all. I can't talk too much about it, you know, because it's kind of still not out yet, and but it's on Amazon Prime. And
does everybody who's not in this know what OTT means? Is that like a general public word?
The streaming services.
Everybody knows.
Streaming platforms to be.
I wasn't sure.
Okay, OTT means the streaming platforms. You know, the.
I know what it means.
Okay.
I wasn't sure if it's.
Yeah. So streaming platforms, you can tell, you know, much more interesting stories, much more unconventional stories. You can have anthologies. And all of these things, which like how Guillermo del Toro has now done this Cabinet of Curiosities on Netflix, and that's
fun.
very, very cool. He's taken some stories from H.P. Lovecraft.
There's a Lovecraft in there too, right?
There's a Pickman's Tale, which is a Lovecraft story, and he's kind of and it's an amazing collection of different filmmakers also.
Is that the one where he crawls into the grave and there's the giant rat? Is that the
No, that's not Pickman's Tale.
Okay.
Pickman's Tale is the one about the paintings that keep disturbing people to commit, you know, seriously, you know, crimes and everything and murders, because the paintings really kind of do something to you mentally and all that. That's Pickman's Tale.
Okay.
But that the other one which you're talking about also was just insane, just visually what. That
was nice.
And that guy crawls through the tunnels and all that. So it's a good collection of films, and that too made by some of the very, very you know, cool filmmakers in horror right now, and he's chosen, handpicked them, and they've all given their take on the stories that Del Toro has handpicked and all, and so it's a very interesting watch. So those kind of experiences are kind of taking that, you know, because you could not do that on a film format very easily before, right? But now you can do anthologies. You can do anthologies which have stories of horror, short stories of horror, and I think that those things will really keep the audiences interested and take it in a different zone. So I think the future, I think, of horror kind of looks good. And as long as you guys are giving us these these encyclopedias for us to, refer to. Like, okay,
lots
now
of
I'm writing a
creatures
story
you
that's set in where Bengal. Okay, let me look up. you know, but yeah, that's going to help really. And so as long as we keep doing this, pushing both the literature and the whole storytelling forward, I think we can see some really amazing stuff going into the future.
Holidays nale adu namma GT Holidays da, South India's #1 travel brand.
Join the team. Which values you and your thoughts? Hiring now.